Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. Today's episode is the first in a three-part series on storytelling. We just finished the negotiation series, and now I want you to understand a little bit about how you translate the information that you have discovered about yourself in the negotiation series into a story about your performance. And it's going to be powerful and impactful. Latoria Pierce is here to help us, and she is a powerhouse. Latoria says that her story is her imposter syndrome's kryptonite. She is going to talk to us about authenticity and speaking your truth. And she is a storyteller at heart, a strategic thinker, and a strong leader. So we're going to have a great conversation with Latoria. So Latoria Pierce is an engagement specialist and entrepreneur in the greater Washington, D.C. area. A storyteller at heart, her work spans tech startup, media, and marketing industries where she's passionate about making space and building solutions that enable brands, communities, and individuals to tell their stories. So stay tuned to this powerful conversation with Latoria. Hey everyone, before we go into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that there is a free quiz that you can take on the nowomanleftbehind.com website. If you log on to the homepage and you scroll down just slightly, you're going to see a section that says, let's find out where you are in your career. If you click on the radio button that's called Take the Quiz, there will be a pop-up that comes up and it says, what's the key blocker in your career path? There are 3 key blockers that you may be operating under and you may not even know it. So if you click on just take the quiz, it's going to be about 10 questions. It really shouldn't take you more than 3 minutes. And then you're going to be able to get some additional resources just by taking the quiz. So remember, go to nowomanleftbehind.com to take the free quiz. Latoria, thank you so much for being on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I watched one of your videos on LinkedIn and you were talking to a group and you said that your story's imposter syndromes is kryptonite. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Like your personal story, your origin story is imposter syndrome's kryptonite. So pretty much the basis of that, and that was something that was given to me by my therapist, Keith. And we were talking about how a lot of times in life, we don't feel like we can rise to the occasion, or an opportunity may come and we start to doubt and question ourselves. But really, we've got everything we need in us for whatever the task, the experience, the opportunity ahead is. And so that's really the essence of that. It's saying that something within your lived experience, something within who you are, your character, your integrity, it's actually already been like gifted to you or embedded in you for the moment, for the opportunity, for the experience that you're facing. So it's actually the thing to take down that imposter syndrome that's trying to convince you that you're the imposter.
Oh
so
my
that
gosh.
was the essence. Yeah.
I love that because now today's conversation is largely around storytelling. And it's perfect because we're coming right off of an 8-episode series on negotiating and kind of figuring out your why and your how and all your skills and all that stuff. And now I love that we're going into the storytelling series now because what you just said is perfect for the segue of an individual, a woman that is trying to advance in her career, and she wants to have that conversation with her manager. And what you said is perfect, because everything that you need is within you, but we need to illustrate to our listeners how they actually now arrange all of the research that they've done, because I've told them, go on, different websites, figure out how much you're worth or how much you want to earn, figure out your skills, figure out all of your accomplishments. So they've already done the research. And now it's a matter of how do they communicate to their manager? So let's start there. What would you recommend our listeners do after they've done all their research?
Yeah, I love that you said that, because in anything, research is important. I think what happens whenever we think about like opening our mouths or getting started to communicate or express something, we trip up with the concern of like saying it the right way.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in that thought of like, am I going to say it the wrong way? Are my words right? That literally it's like the cat doesn't have to have our tongue. It's like knotted up in like insecurity and doubt. The presentation is important, but when I say presentation, I don't mean articulation and eloquence. I mean the preparation. And I think that's just it. And we can liken it to anything else we do in life. When we go into the kitchen and we prepare to cook, even something as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, we already know what our ingredients are. I don't have to tell us that. We know we need a utensil, and we know that there's a process that we like to prepare our sandwich. Now, your process may be different from mine, but the common thread, the bare minimum is we need peanut butter, jelly, bread, and a utensil. And so it's the same thing when we think about how we express ourselves. We don't just, show up and wing it, especially when it's a serious conversation. We come prepared. So it's gathering that information. And I think one of the things that I try to do, whether I'm talking to my mom about something important, or to your point, within the workspace, especially being a female founder of color in the tech space, I'm expressing something about myself, my vision, or my company is I think through those ingredients first before I talk to anybody else about it. So I always encourage folks, find a little space. This could be in your car. This could be while you're at the gym and you just kind of put in some headphones, or preferably you grab a few minutes just of silent space and you think through what you want to say. And sometimes I know for some folks, it's like they don't trust just their own ear, so they need someone else. It doesn't hurt to have your person or a good friend that you call and just talk through some of those talking points, some of those preparation points. And I think the most important thing, because I think that this comes down to just the human experience, speak from your most authentic self. If you focus on that, you prepare, and even if you kind of like bullet it out and you get there and your hands are shaking, your palms are sweaty, that's all right. Deep breath. And then come from like the depth of your authenticity. And the reason why I say that is because in this life, we have so many different titles depending on the environments we're in. But at the end of the day, when it comes to self-expression, and it doesn't matter if that conversation is personal or professional, your truth is your truth. So if you just say, you know what, you make up your mind, and that's an influential internal thing. I'm going to speak my truth. Then the delivery just flows. So yes, take those nuggets, those ingredients that you prepared, review them, whether it be like a personal review or you get with like someone that you trust and that you're comfortable with and you talk through it. And then when you show up, it's like you're advocating for yourself, but that ability to advocate starts with your authenticity. Just keep it real. Just tell it like it is. And that effect, nobody can make that up. Nobody can teach you it. It's just like, it's magic. It just happens. And the more we do it, the more confident we become in the process.
I love that. Now, when we're talking about storytelling is exactly what you just said. Come from a space of you being prepared, of course, but you, like you said, tell your truth. And I think a lot of times, and I think that video that I watched about you had mentioned that sometimes especially when we're talking business, we try to not necessarily hide, but not highlight ourselves, almost kind of keep ourselves in the closet a little bit. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I love that. That is something that for me has been a process. But you learn that every day that like you dim your light or like you don't spread your wings in a moment or opportunity, it's like you lose time to feel good, to cultivate your own happiness, to see what could happen if. And so in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, I put in a lot of work to learn how to spread my wings as far as they would go, turn my light up to its maximum, and just see what happens. It's so important because when we dim our light, when we kind of shy away or that thought kicks in, because it's typically a thought that makes us like, we'll be just enough bold. And then the thought comes and we're like, never mind. We kind of, shrink. It ends up being this very weird version of like self-defeat. One of the things I told myself recently, and I've been spending the last 3 months doing this, is going back to that authenticity piece. Just say what you mean to say what you feel. I already know that, I'm not reckless. And so, there's going to be some protocol just naturally to the things that come out of my mouth. But I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't filter myself. Like if I just said it like I feel it, whatever that organic voice is, that organic expression. And then I told myself, it may be scary when I go to speak about certain things, but just give yourself 3 months and collect the data. If it works against you and you start a bunch of fights and you lose friends and people close the door on you, come January 1st, now don't do that. But what if something different happens, something unique happens, something stirs up inside of me and then it changes things around me like I've never seen it before? Well, now I've discovered a new way to get from point A to point B to accomplish my goals, to not only express myself, but to have moments where I can help other folks kind of glean from that experience and try it out for themselves. And as we sit here, I'm only 10 days out from that 3-month experience, and it has brought to fruition so many amazing things. So all that to say, just know that when that thought comes, if you side with it, to go ahead and be quiet, you side with it to go ahead and mute yourself, dim your light, tuck your wings, you are removing time and opportunity from yourself to see what would happen if you showed up, not just for you, but for someone else. Another thing I always try to think about is that when we face a hurdle, what we decide to do in that moment toward that hurdle not only dictates what happens for us, but those who come after us, other women, other women of color, other people in general, other folks who may be a bit more soft-spoken or have the same qualities as us. So it's like those bold moves that you make, even the baby steps, they count. They're not only for you, but you're paving a path for somebody that's coming behind you as well. And I think that should be enough motivation to say, let me just try.
Absolutely. And I think, that's a lot of the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing is definitely because we want to be able to spread the word and help those women that are coming up behind us, because you're obviously a person of color. I don't look like I'm a person of color because I'm very white complected, but I'm 100% Mexican. So all my family is like dark complected, and Mexican is a combination of Spanish people with indigenous. So I kind of am more light complected from the Spanish heritage, but I have sisters that are dark complected. So, it just depends. But us hiding, or just from when you have that thought and you're like, oh man, what if this happens? And then you kind of shrink yourself inside your brain. And then you're like, oh no, never mind. But instead, just go for it, right? Just do it because otherwise you are allowing that fear to manage your life. And that's just so unfortunate. So now I know that you're a storyteller at heart, and you're also a strategic thinker. So how do you blend both of those in the business world?
Yeah, I think that, and that has really become like what I call my superpower. I've learned that bringing that component of storytelling into the business space makes room for me to show up as Latoria and other folks to show up as themselves. I have been on calls with, millionaire male investors and seen tears in their eyes. Wow. And we look as different as night and day, and we've had two different life experiences. But in this moment, it creates just like a sense of intimacy. And I mean, intimacy for the word of connection.
Yes.
And that is a powerful thing. And so I've learned that it starts with me listening to me. The life gets really noisy. And the more titles we have, the noisier it becomes. My best friend and I, we were talking about how, especially with women, there's almost this expectation. I shouldn't say almost. There's this expectation that we're always expected to kind of like put others before ourselves. So if a sacrifice has to be made, like, for example, in the work that I do in the future of workspace, when COVID hit, 100% of the folks who exited the workforce in December 2020 were women. Why? Because children couldn't go to school. Mm-hmm. There was no discussion. The automatic expectation was that all mothers would stay home. And that's what happened. It's a societal expectation. And then as women, of course, because we nurture and we care for those that we love, we jump in and we do what we have to do. And I just think that when we think about that, it's like, wow, I'm already having to sacrifice anyway. Yeah, I'm already having to kind of take on extra expectation anyway. So if we're gonna do it anyway, let's use our own voices. If we're gonna do it anyway, let's tell folks what we need to do it right. Because the truth of the matter is, the environment can only go so far without us. And there is that workforce exit was of major concern to employers, because we know for sure that GDP shows that when women are not a part of the workforce, there's an economic effect, a major one, a measurable one. And so there's a contribution that comes from the skill sets, the presence, and the expertise of women in professional spaces. What I mean by that is, the workforce is already telling us our value. Mm-hmm. We have to know it. We have to hold on to it, and we have to speak up for it. We always say, what's the worst that can happen? And then we're like, oh, I don't want to find out. Actually, it's like, no, let me talk about that. Because if we think about it, the worst that can happen is an irrational thought. That's the reality of it. The worst that can happen never happens, especially when you're advocating for someone, and especially when it's yourself. So I think it comes down to, that's what I did. I was just like, you know what? This is going to sound weird, but this is just kind of how I get myself to be brave. Sometimes I'll say, Latoria, when you're 90 years old, what would 90-year-old Latoria say to 39-year-old Latoria? Like, what would she be like? Girl, you should have taken that opportunity to say X, Y, and Z, because that would have been good for both of us, me now and you then. I think about that. And if I think that I would arrive to 90 and regret that in my late 30s, when I had them, I was using my voice and I was right in the moment, and it was that action moment, what would I have done? And when I think about having kids and grandkids, and what would I tell them? My mother always says, you can't invest in anyone else until you invest in yourself. And that even comes down to the conversations we have in the workspace to express our needs, our desires, our vision. So that's one of the things I did. I'm just like, you know what? What are the things that are important to me and my character and my integrity and my everyday life? Let me make room for those things in the workspace. And really, I should look like the same person in both environments. And so that's what I try to do. I try to just bring all of Latoria to the workspace. If somebody doesn't like it, that's okay. Mm-hmm. We can have a discussion there, because there's a culture, there's an environment, there's a place where I belong and I am just right. And if that's not here, it's somewhere, and we'll find it. Absolutely. We'll find it as long as we speak up. But if we give in, if we acquiesce with that fear, we're holding ourselves back. So that storytelling piece really just comes from us saying, you know what? I'm just going to say what I feel. I'm just going to bring what I know. I'm going to draw from my character, my integrity. And the same way I inject that in my personal life, I'm going to make room for that, plant seeds of that in my professional environment as well. And it is amazing what will happen. The leadership, the execs above you, you'll end up in certain ways leading them. You'll end up in certain ways managing up. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner. I mean it in a growth manner and a relational approach. It's amazing what could happen when we just take our truth, because that's really what storytelling is. And we put it into places that matter to us outside of just the personal life.
Thank you for clarifying that storytelling piece. So you said it's telling your truth and just kind of putting it out in the world. And that's what we're talking about. And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask you, okay, whenever we're talking about storytelling, what exactly are we talking about? And I love that you clarified that it's telling your truth. And obviously, from having diversity, not just with women, but with women of color in leadership positions, you can tell that the companies, well, first of all, companies prosper better. There's, a lot more, obviously, diversity, but all that diversity brings points that maybe that particular company had not thought about. And a lot of times, because of that different perspectives, they do better financially. So it helps everybody to have not only, again, women in those leadership positions, but women of color, whether they're Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, whatever. But we all have to tell our story. And I love the fact that you said that you may not be liked by everyone, but there is a place in the world for you where you belong. And I think, obviously, with the diversity, equity, inclusion, now belonging, that's what people have, especially people in the corporate world, have now discovered, that people just want to belong. They want to come and they want to do a job, but they want to be accepted as they are, for who they are, and do a good job. And how many stories have we heard that when you are accepted and you're welcomed, you're more productive, you do better, you thrive. And we all just want to live a good life. And again, this is why you and I are doing the work that we're doing. Now, I know that, let's say you have a mission to build others up through your words, and to empower communities through the work. So tell me a little bit about the work that you've done. You're obviously a founder of the tech startup. So tell me a little bit, and I see the passion in you. I see the passion of the work that you're doing. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your story. How did you come up with your mission, and why is it important for you to empower communities?
Yeah, and that mission, thank you for grabbing that. That really is more of a life mission for me, inspiring through my words and empowering communities through my work. I have this really, I call it this crazy background. Well, it looked crazy at first, and then you arrive to certain places in life, and you're like, that's why I had to go through that experience. Yes. But it was like this mashup, this mosaic of business meets social impact, and then marketing, and then tech came in there as of recent. But I think kind of like a bit of my origin story. So I was that kid who, bless my parents' heart, I always loved storytelling. I when I was like 4 or 5, I would watch Sally Jesse Raphael and Oprah and Donahue. And what stood out to me was all the emotions that were provoked when you saw these folks like sitting on stage having conversations. And being young, I didn't know what they were talking about, but I saw the people and their reactions. And I was always a talker. And so, I looked for spaces where talking and conversation just seemed to thrive. As I got a little older, I loved storytelling. I loved the movie space. So after middle school, I would get home, and I would, back then, it was like, the landline phones, and I would call Paramount and Warner Brothers. And, my poor parents would be like, you were on hold with Paramount all the way in California for 2 hours. Like, this cost us, like, let's shorten the time. But I had so many questions, because I wanted to know, how do you create these works of art that allow people to have a voice? I really wanted to understand that. And that was just kind of always in me. So, I went on to do work in the domestic violence space, a lot of work in the community, just supporting businesses, from small businesses to global brands and nonprofits, with connecting with target consumers, connecting with underrepresented communities, all around products and services that would empower our better lives. And from the automotive industry to the healthcare training institute industry, like I said, the DV industry, and working with organizations like ARP Foundation, fintech companies like LifeSense, partnerships with organizations like Wells Fargo Foundation. It all came together up to the work that I'm doing now at Handoff, and, building software that enables job sharing. At the heart of it all was creating solutions that would allow somebody to have, like, just a stronger step, a more solid foundation. And then in the midst of that, producing some talk shows and just inspiring and sparking dialogue and conversation that made room for folks to have their voices heard, especially those that we weren't hearing from. And so every day, no matter how the work changes, like being a founder in tech was definitely something I didn't see a couple of years ago. But then you learn that technology is actually just a resource, and you can use it to close the gap. You could put it behind any kind of art, any industry, and it can help you to scale or to do some good. But I try to make sure that in any work that I do, I hold on to that personal mission, and I find spaces, and I'm always grateful for platforms like yours, where I can have the dialogue that inspires through word. But when I turn around and I go and I do that work, whether it's leading my team, as a founder in the tech space, whether it was the days that I was in, deep into the heart of communities in churches or schools and having conversation around domestic violence resources, I always try to make sure that I show up and I use my voice. And when I didn't, I was always blessed with somebody. And I had a good mentor of mine. She's no longer with us, but Sophie Ford. She was actually, when I worked in the DV space, the executive director of the organization I worked for. She brought me on to do some community engagement around the services that we were offering to survivors of domestic violence. And I remember I was going out and I was speaking, and you had some folks on the political end and so forth getting a little uncomfortable. And she looked me in the face and she said, "Latoria, I did not hire you to do this work to dim your light or to tuck your wings." She said, "You turn that light up to its maximum and spread those wings." She's like, "Because that is my expectation of you. And every single person that you're spreading this message for, they need to receive it. They need you to turn that light up to maximum." And she was like, "And I expect nothing less. And I mean that." And I think that expectation coming from someone that I respect and someone who hired me, I was like, "Oh, you got to show up." And I did. Yeah. And it made a lot of change all the way up to the House and the Senate. So, just all to say, I think that the more I decided to I first came up with that mission. I was like, what do I want to do? No matter the work, no matter where I go, no matter who I meet, what do I want to be known for? And once I had that 2-line statement, I find every door I walk in, I find a way to make sure I can birth that, I can cultivate that.
Oh my gosh, I think that's fantastic. And thank you for your work in the domestic abuse space, because part of my origin story is that I was in a domestic abuse situation, and I had to leave in the middle of the day with my kids. And then I had a very long, arduous 4-year divorce that just financially ruined me. And that's kind of what I talk about, because I think it's really important. Like you said, for so many years, I was ashamed of, having gone through that situation, to no fault of my own. That was my life. And a lot of the work that I do is because I want women to be able to have a career where they can support themselves. And my mom, kind of like your parents, my mom was always the one that said, you have to be able to take care of yourself and your kids. It's important for you to have a career. It's important for you to work. And when I was married, my ex-husband stayed home with the kids. And, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was the one that stayed home, but it gave me the opportunity to keep working. And the ability to have that job and that salary gave me the opportunity to leave a very unfortunate, situation. And I'm grateful for people like yourselves, because I had a lot of support with not knowing what to do. And so thank you again for the work that you've done with the domestic abuse, because there are so many women out there that, I have to just say this one last thing about it. I went to see a lawyer right after I left, and the lawyer told me, he said, you're a classic example of a domestic abuse violence victim. And the thought that went through my head was like, how is that possible? I am a working professional. And it didn't dawn on me that I was in even that situation, because it happened very slowly and all that stuff. But it impacts everybody of all races, of all ages. And we need people like, yourself with your work and your passion. And, so enough about
it. And thank you for sharing that. No, and I think it's an important topic. And I think that one of the things that society doesn't do is recognize that and it's predominantly women who go through these experiences. The data shows that. But the word really is survivor. Mm-hmm. You survived that. And I think that really is, we all have different stories and lived experiences where we've been a survivor, whether it's a health situation, whether it's a relationship. We can all think of a moment where we had to like overcome. And that is what you did. And I think that, again, it's so important to look for ways in society where we can create a sense of community and support for others. One of the things I love most about the work I'm doing, though it's challenging, is when we think about ushering in a job share model. Job sharing allows for caregivers, which, are a majority women, mm-hmm. to be able to have career building non-gig work that allows for them to have better salary and benefits, while still having the time to be present at home for the people and the moments that matter. And when you create that kind of space, because balance is something that should be a norm, not a luxury, it allows for individuals who are at a point in their lives where they may be in a dark moment, they may be in a tough moment or an unhealthy relationship, to say, hey, I have options because I have opportunity. Yes. And so it's very important. I thank God for my dad coming in the picture, but in, the early years of my life, my mom was a teen mom, and she had my older sister and I by the age of 18. And to your point, she worked really hard to still go to school and to survive. And there's a part of our story where, she, as a breadwinning mother and as a young mother, also had to be a space of safety. Yes. And so, more support has to happen for women, for people, and the men too who experience it in different environments. We have to cultivate that in different ways. I think it's in community organizations, be it church or be it even just the local YMCAs or spaces that are made for gathering, to work environments. At the end of the day, behavioral science is a big part of the work that we do, and behavioral science considers the fact it's really simple. A person's thoughts and the things that happen in their external environment affect their behavior. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot we can do to help individuals through that process. It just really comes down to making space. Yeah. And I think as we're talking about storytelling today, it's like, well, how do you make space? It really does start with conversation. And when we talk about conversation, then it's connection and conversation. And how does connection happen? When we're okay with grabbing from our origin story, grabbing from our lived experience, telling our truth, and depositing that into the dialogue. It allows for something different to happen, like we're doing today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's funny because when I first started working on my origin story, I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to say this? Like, how am I going to, and now that it's out there and, I have a book with my chapter of my story. And I mean, the only two people that I was really concerned about were my children. So my son's 24, my daughter's 21. And I said, this is my story. I'm not trying to, hurt anybody or anything, but it's part of my life. I can't, like you said, hide it or push it. And I'm no longer ashamed of it because I know it's not my fault. It's just, it happened for me, not to me, So
yeah. And that's the part, right? Like, I think even when I was building Handoff, I was really nervous to tell my mom was a teen mom. We don't run around talking about that.
Right.
And so this was like the first time publicly where that was a part of the conversation. And I was like, is my mom going to mind? Of course she didn't. I didn't ask her permission because I was like, you know what? It's my story.
Yes.
There's a part where it's all my own. And even though my mom was 18, I was 1 year old. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that became my story, and it was like, that matters. And if we try to we put these barriers in place as to and again, that's fear and thought to say, you know what, I shouldn't say anything because what if somebody reads it and then this person's offended and it turns into an argument. And it's like, all those thoughts are irrational. And it's like, why do I want to share this? What is stirring up in me that says it's time to talk about it? And again, a lot of times when we don't share, we hold other people back from their breakthrough as well, because it's our story that lights a flame, our story that sparks a thought, our story that deposits that last dose of courage someone else needed to go the extra mile, to take that one step that's going to be life-changing or life-saving for them. And I think a lot of times when we are victimized as survivors of anything, the biggest fear we have, and it's almost like a prison, is this belief that we're the only one.
Yes.
We're the only one. And so, and then we start to feel like we're dressed in this costume that says, I'm the only one. Or we wear a scarlet letter that says, I'm the only one. And then you open your mouth and you learn that literally out of 5 women, 3 could finish your sentence with their own story.
Absolutely.
And then the best part of that is not just the pain of the story, but the triumph. Because sometimes you're at step 10 and I'm at step 2. But you telling me what you did to get from 2 to 10 gives me an aha moment of how I'm going to do that. So growth happens when we tell our stories, and growth happens when we keep it real in telling our story. Don't take out the stuff that you think looks ugly. That is what I'm learning now, because it's not, it's just real. And if you remove, there are certain things, I'll do a quick analogy. Like my team and I were doing like a Christmas elixir type of party we had last Friday. And this really cool gal got on with us, and she had sent us these little boxes, and they had all these natural ingredients. And there was like, chocolate and peppermint and like all these natural powders. And it was like root in its like natural form. And when you taste these things one by one by themselves, some of them taste bitter. Mm-hmm. Some of them had disgusting taste. But when they were mixed and blended, all the ingredients together, it was magnificent. There was just enough sweet. There was just the balance was there. Wow. It's the same thing with our stories. If you remove those things that sound bitter, that look dark, that don't fit right because you feel like, oh, I'm going to be judged, or I'm afraid about how that's going to look, you dilute the story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stick. So people say, well, how does the story stick? Bring all the stuff. Now, you can decide the dose. You can decide how much you want to give, but just make sure that it's authentic. Make sure that when you tell it, there's no conviction that like, oh, I was lying or I was holding back. You can decide that delivery. And I think it just starts with that first time of showing up and telling it as it is.
I love that all that you said there, because the fact about the connection and the authenticity, and truth be told, it was my connection with my OBGYN that I had with her, because she was the one that was like, Rosie, you need to do something about this. You can't be in this relationship. And it wasn't that I was hiding it from my family again. I wasn't telling them what was happening because I wasn't really sure that I was in, I didn't even really know what was happening myself until my doctor was like, listen, you can't, this is not right. This is not normal. You need to do something. And that's where the connection and the trust comes in, because if you are in a situation, you confide, whether it's in a, physician or a trusted family member, just having that authenticity, sometimes people will say, that's not right. You need to do something about that. And that changes your life, whether it's your personal situation or at work. And again, this is why you and I are so passionate about the work that we do, because we want to make sure that whatever message you're listening to out there resonates with even just one person, where if you're in the corporate world and you're trying to advance in your career, tell your truth, tell your story in a connection way, in a relational way, authentic. And that's where the magic happens, right?
That's it. You know why? Because I think what happens is it allows that person permission to meet you in being human. And it always will spark something for somebody. Maybe it was an experience their mother went through, or as a child, something that they saw, their neighbor go through. And here they are, an adult and the decision maker, the boss, the manager, the CFO, the CEO, and you're sitting in front of them and you're giving this authenticity. And I'm a lover of quotes, and I know you are too. So I'm going to share one. One of my quotes is, vulnerability is actually strength. It's not weakness.
Yeah.
So you are standing in your strength in moments where you are vulnerable. I also believe, and Brene Brown says this, that people have to earn the right to hear certain things. So you'll know the person you want to go to, but when you get there, vulnerability, when you show that, that's not you being weak or you coming before them like, oh, well, like I can't. that's you exhibiting strength. And it inspires even the folks who are the decision makers in your organization. And so I think when we do that, it allows people to show up also just as a part of a human experience, not as your boss, not as the CEO, but as whoever they are by name, as you're there standing by name, telling your story. And you'd be surprised. You'll be there asking for one opportunity, but because of how bold you were and intentional, they'll lean on you for additional support. Just make sure you get paid for it.
Absolutely.
Make sure you get paid for it. That's my thing. Like, I'll contribute it, but that also comes with the cost. So yeah, it's the best thing that we can do. And it also makes sure that we value every day that we're alive. We don't know enough about tomorrow to live today timid. We don't. We don't know enough about tomorrow to live today timid.
I agree. So many women are afraid of, what are they going to say? Or maybe they won't get it, or I don't qualify, or I don't have, the qualifications for the job. And that's exactly why I started doing what I'm doing, is because I am so tired of seeing how women hold themselves back in their careers, that it's time for someone to be like, no, you can do this. You are brave, you're bold. And actually, that's how I always end my podcast, be brave, be bold, and take action. That is what I want women to do. And just, and a lot of times, I actually was thinking about this years back, and I'm 53. So I, been around the block. And when I was much younger and I had a problem, I would always go to like 4 or 5 people. And it would be I have 3 sisters and, my couple best friends. And I would kind of like gather information. And then based on all the information that I gathered, I would make a decision on whatever was happening. And now, because I've gone through life and, I had kids and whatever, now I'm like, okay, when I do have a problem, I rely on me. What do I think about that? How do I feel about that? And yes, I can talk to, my family, but I no longer go to others, because I know, as you said, the answer is within me. And I know, what to do and what the right thing is. So
we have to own that final decision.
Yes.
And it's so important, because the more we do that one by one, it builds a sense of it makes our sight laser focused. And when we want to be able to measure growth, what you did, that's called doing the work. And it's like, because I feel like this, I think that we get so concerned. Like, I love that how you use the example of like, oh, well, maybe I won't go for that job because I don't have all the skills. Let me tell you something. If you don't go for it, the person who fills the job doesn't have all the skill sets.
Yes.
And if they start and quit tomorrow, the person who fills it will not have all the skill sets. I don't care if they went to 10 Ivy League universities. I would love for somebody to come and sit before my face and say that they could put a check in every single box on a job description. They would be lying. And I would just end the conversation there. And the reason why I know that is because we all have an area of which we need to learn from the ground up, or we're still growing. None of us, and that'll be for a lifetime, have ever fully arrived. Even the folks who are the best of the best, you give them something and they'll tell you, writing is my strength, but math is not. Or yes, you let me dissect and I can do that all day, but public speaking, we all have that. And so a part of being an expert is being a student.
Exactly.
And that's another thing that I embrace. If I look at a job and I'm like, you know what? For the most part, I've got the core needs that'll make sure that I don't sink the boat. You can't. Now, I won't lie. If I can't do something, then I can't. But usually it's rare that we try to throw ourselves in the deep end. If we approach a job, there's a passion there. There's a curiosity that's been sparked, and there's something we bring to the table. And if you notice that steps 1 through 3, you're like, well, I didn't do that. The first thought should be, are there other skills I can pull from to reskill and upskill that can deposit into this? Like, one thing that women are known for is time, crises, and prioritization management in personal life. If you've been doing those things in your personal life, you can pull from that and pump it into the professional environment. You're the same person. The dialogue's just different. And so I think that at the root of storytelling also is us making room day by day, moment by moment, to build confidence in our thought process and in how we express that. And again, don't get caught up in articulation and eloquence. Focus on keeping it real, authenticity. And the more we do that, we'll start to notice that no matter what room we show up in, whether it's a demanding parent, a child who's like that we've been enabling, a boss who, is holding us back and or not holding us back, but they're too busy to see our potential, or it's us. We're looking at an opportunity and it's like, I want to start a business. I want to go for this, but we'll be able to talk to ourselves and others in a way that says, listen, here's who I am. Here's my goal. And here's the support that I need from you. And as I have your support, here's what I'm going to bring to the table. And let me tell you why.
Oh my gosh. I love that. This has been an amazing conversation, Latoria. So this is fantastic. Now, would you be able to share with us either a couple of powerful phrases or a couple of tips that our listeners can really benefit from so that they can use them in their careers?
Yes. A quote that I heard recently from a fellow founder and friend of mine, Wimumo Abi, of the recently unicorned startup Esusu. He has this quote that he always says, "Be caught trying." And we could just stay right there because I don't want folks to forget that. Be caught trying. That is such a powerful statement. And we realize that, you know what? That actually just starts with us. Yeah. And whatever it is, if we have a weight loss journey, if we want to let go of the past, if we want to progress to a certain opportunity or pursue a role or a promotion at work, it's like when we think about what can I do to help myself get ahead or closer to that goal, be caught trying. Because when we take that first step to make an effort, more often than not, I would almost go as far as saying 100% of the time, somebody, a good friend of mine, Eva, calls them our cheerleaders, comes along and helps us get a step further. So be caught trying, because that means that you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything, but you're in action, you're in motion of being ready. So I could think of I have a million other in my head, but I told myself, I was like, just hold on to that one. I don't want anybody to forget that. In this moment, as you're watching, I want to encourage every listener, think of that goal that's like pressing on your heart. I mean, it's the heaviest one. It's the one that's in your ears and in your face. And I want you to look at that goal and say, I'm going to be caught trying, and just sit with that. Sit with that for about 24 hours and let that quote, that action-oriented phrase, inspire your next step. You want to be caught trying.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's phenomenal. Okay. The main takeaway that I have from our conversation is just be true to yourself.
Yes.
That's the main takeaway, because if you try to hide yourself in your light, you're just doing yourself and the world a disservice, because someone needs you to do whatever it is that you're trying to do to be a brighter light in the world.
Yeah. It's like, give yourself permission to just simply have a human experience. Step outside of all the titles and categories, personal versus professional. When I step into this environment, I have to be a different person. We all know the protocol. It's just like if somebody comes to our house, there's a way we're going to make the space comfortable. We all know the protocol. But when it comes to how we make room for ourselves and we show up, how we use our voice, go real deep, get to the root, the surface of your authenticity, of your core. Start grabbing from there, especially when you think about telling your story. And the reason why you're doing that is because you need it to be as real as possible. It's that keeping it 100, as we say, or being authentic, that's going to make that story stick. People think it's all these skills that you're taught. Oh, we read all these books, but really you can learn all those things. You can have more degrees than a thermometer. You can you can listen to every TED talk and it still doesn't work as long as you leave authenticity on the other side of the door. So it's like, start from there and decide, as Latoria, not Latoria the founder, not Latoria the daughter or the sister or any other titles that I become, as Latoria Danielle Pierce. Whatever room I walk into, when a conversation presents itself, an opportunity or an idea, the first thing I'm going to do is get to the depth of my core, and I'm going to pull from there. And I'm going to find the things within my story, within my experiences, and within my desires. And I'm going to prepare myself. And then I'm going to express this thing, to ask for what I need and to show forth what I'm willing to do to get to that goal. So that's the thing. Just get into that authenticity, and then the rest just flows. And flow is a beautiful place to be in. If we get a chance to do another conversation, I have an executive coach that taught me about being in flow. I would love to share some thoughts around that as well. But yes, I encourage everyone to not only embrace, but have fun and feel good and come alive when you tell your story.
Gosh, Latoria, well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today here. And I'm so excited for what is in your future, because again, you're very passionate about your work. And I'm just so excited to see where you go in your career and your life. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for the platform and for having me. I appreciate you and every listener.
Thank you. I hope you agree with me that Latoria Pierce is a powerhouse. You can tell that she is just very passionate about storytelling, and she left us with 2 great tips. The first tip, she says, be caught trying. One of her friends, Wamimo Abbey, has always said that to her, be caught trying. Whether you're trying to lose weight or pursue a career goal, you need to try. The second thing that she says is, give yourself permission to simply have a human experience. She says how you use your voice to get to the surface of your authenticity and core are key, and then the rest just flows from there. And I think that's so true, because when I have been authentic and vulnerable, that's when I think things really start happening for me. So I think those 2 tips are fabulous. Latoria's contact information is going to be on the episode website. She is on LinkedIn. I am just so excited to see where her career goes. She is young, she's energetic, and she's passionate. And once again, I'm going to say it again, she is a powerhouse. So appreciate you so much, Latoria. And with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.